Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by the naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Franklin D. Roosevelt. This was the opening part of a speech given to Congress by Franklin D. Roosevelt, asking for Congress to declare war on the Empire of Japan. This was after the attack on Pearl Harbor, which left the Pacific Fleet and Air Force completely in shambles and a majority of it destroyed. Following this, the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, New Guinea, the Solomon Islands, and Guam were all taken from the United States and Great Britain by Japan. After those islands, one stood in the way. The island of Midway, a small 2.4 square mile island which housed an airfield and small naval base of the United States. The Battle of Midway was the turning point of the Second World War. The Japanese plan was to completely disable the Pacific Fleet by luring in all the aircraft carriers that had not been in port the day Pearl Harbor happened, and to take the island of Midway and use it for a potential staging ground to invade Australia, Hawaii, or the West Coast. This, in turn, with all those things being taken, would force America to sue for peace and lift the oil embargo that they had placed on Japan 2 years prior to that. The 4 Japanese aircraft carriers that were involved at the Battle of Midway were the Akagi, the Kaga, the Soryu, and the Hiryu. The 3 American aircraft carriers at Midway were the USS Hornet, the USS Enterprise, and the USS Yorktown. The initial bombing started on June 3rd, 1942, and the battle ended on June 7th, 1942. In the end, all 4 Japanese carriers were sunk by American bombers and torpedo bombers. Japan suffered not only the complete destruction of the 4 aircraft carriers, but they also lost over 300 experienced men that operated on these carriers for 5+ years now, which was the true loss. This completely crippled the Japanese Navy, as they only had a total of 9 aircraft carriers, and these were their 4 biggest. So they lost the capability of having moving airfields on the water. The United States, they lost just 1 carrier and only 317 men. And, as stated before, was the true turning point of the war, and the moment that Japanese truly lost the war. These 4 days were Japan's days of infamy. This was the make or break. They gambled it all, and they lost it all. As stated before, they never recovered, and wouldn't be on the offensive again for the rest of the war. They were backpedaling all the way back to Japan itself. Along with the 3,000 men, as stated, the 4 aircraft carriers that were lost could not be replaced, unlike the United States. Japan did not house the industrial power to mass produce aircraft carriers, aircrafts, or really anything other than weapons. And even if they could, they couldn't fuel them. America owned the oil that they were purchasing for their pre-war stock, meaning that they had a finite amount of days left before their planes would stop flying, their ships would stop sailing, and their tanks would stop rolling. They lost a vast majority of their experienced pilots, sailors, and army crew that had planned to invade Midway itself. I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something about World War II, and I hope you all enjoyed. Have a good rest of your day.